Hi everyone, and welcome to the Zeitgeist Movement podcast. My name's Casey and I'm the National Coordinator for Australia, and I'm fortunate enough to be sitting here with two of my very close friends, Zach, the Queensland Zeitgeist Movement Coordinator.
Hey.
And Michael, one of the South Australian Zeitgeist Movement Coordinators.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. And we're really fortunate to have Michael here at the moment because he's come all the way here from South Australia just recently. And could you tell us why you're here, Michael?
To help organise Z-Day and present at it.
Absolutely. And you've been a wonderful help to me so far in all of the work that we have to do leading up to the big day. And Zach, what about you? How have you been involved in Z-Day so far?
Well, I know I'm not doing quite as much work as you guys. You guys definitely are better organisers than me, but I just gave a couple of presentations. And I'll probably be a backup presenter for Z-Day.
Well, I think that you're modest because you do like to say that that you're not as good an organizer, but Zach's actually doing quite an important job for Z-Day as well, which is organising our free food. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So basically, welcome to the podcast, guys. What we'd really like to talk about today is, as the Pre ZDAY podcast, what the event is about, what we're doing it for, and what we hope to get out of it. So our main theme is towards global unity and abundance. And this was a theme that took us a little while to think about. There were a lot of different themes that we'd had in the past at previous Z-Days. Can anyone remember previous Z-Day themes?
I actually can't, no.
I know there was one that was towards a Post-Scarcity Society or something like that, something similar to that. And I kind of wanted to stick with that theme of post-scarcity, but I wanted to have this a positive spin on it, so I decided to go with abundance. And I think that a really common theme that seems to be going on at the moment around the world, especially in groups that really want to see a better world, is this idea of unity. And the lack of unification that we are seeing going on in the world is something that really restricts us from being able to make the big changes we want to see. Would you guys agree?
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. In the last several years, we've just seen more and more division among activist groups, and it's really unproductive because we're not able to work together for things that we ultimately agree on.
Yeah, and I think what I'd really like to do is bring groups together so that we can really work towards the world we want to see. And on top of that, I think there's a lot of elements to do with unity, not just to do with unification of different sustainability groups or other groups that are trying to create a better world, but also the unity between things that people often see in opposition, things like science and art. And I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, if you think there is any opposition between science and art.
I don't think so. I think they can definitely go together. I mean, science produces amazing art. If you think about the mathematical formulas that produce beautiful patterns and things.
Yeah, I worked for the Australian Network for Art and Technology a few years ago, and so that was all about projects that are both science and art-based and collaborating together. So I definitely think that they work well together.
Yeah, I would say it goes further than what Zach said, which is they can go well together. I think it's actually almost a necessity for them to go together, in that even part of the scientific method is the creative process, which goes with hypothesizing. And then, the mixture of being able to think creatively and open-mindedly and then apply skepticism and critical thought to it.
Definitely.
And another part of unity that I've thought a lot about is a unity of basically the mind and the heart. And I know that this might sound a little bit cheesy right now, but the idea is basically that although we do need to start thinking very clearly about the kind of solutions we need to make in the world, we also need to think about what the purpose for that is. And, because if you just have technical you just apply technical solutions. I shouldn't say the word solutions. I'm trying to think of a better way to say it. But basically, you can create technologies that aren't necessarily done in the right way of thinking.
Band-aid fixes.
Yeah, I was thinking even something more sinister than that.
Technology is only a tool, so it depends on how you use it and what value system the society has. So the Zeitgeist movement is about changing the zeitgeist of our culture, about changing the values that we hold. And we have amazing technology. We have an amazing capacity to change the world, and it's up to us to decide how we use that technology.
Yeah, it's interesting because Carl Sagan was the one who said, if we don't understand what's going on in science and technology, then we're up for grabs. If we don't understand, then people can take advantage of us. So it's important for us to understand with our mind what is going on in science and technology. We can't neglect that. And as a matter of fact, we can utilize that enormous abundance of knowledge in order to create a better world. But we, of course, must have our heart in the right place.
And I feel like our heart isn't in the right place because of our definition of success. So at least within Western world, if you've made it in society, you've achieved financial, material wealth, power, control, fame. These aren't things that are good long-term for the benefit of all of society. I would prefer to see our definition of success be more about how much have you contributed to human well-being and the environment. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting to think about the incentives that are in this culture. And the incentives seem to be based more around creating destructive forces rather than forces that create a better world. So what kind of incentives could we put in place to create that kind of thinking that we'd like to see?
Well, we have an economic system right now that actually incentivizes corrupt behavior. This is something actually one of our presenters on ZDAY talks about in his presentation, Moral Agency in a Free Market Economy.
Rich Penny?
Yeah, Rich Penny talks about how the market structure actually changes human behavior and perception of what we value, and we end up doing things that we would otherwise not do that are aberrant behavior.
Absolutely. So I guess the question is what kind of way, how could we incentivize the things we do want to see as opposed to the things we don't want to see?
I would say people should go along to ZDAY and see.
That's a very nice answer. Yeah, so there's lots of ideas getting around. Sorry, go on, Zach.
But we need to actually fundamentally change how our society is structured, because it's basically ruled now by a bunch of political, religious, and monetary institutions which are becoming more and more archaic and irrelevant to human well-being and the health of the planet. So it is actually necessary for us to kind of evolve past the need for money.
And that's really interesting because I see this as a really fundamental question of whether we apply technical solutions first or whether there has to be kind of this global shift in consciousness. This kind of different way of thinking needs to evolve amongst critical mass in order for these to see these changes we want to see. And I think that this is where a lot of the time people get caught up in what's more important. We need both, but what seems to happen is that we lose that sense of unity when people value one more over the other and they don't understand why people are doing that. But both sides are equally important. So I guess that's what I'm talking about today when we're talking about about promoting this sense of global unity at ZDAY this year.
I think it's actually a iterative process. So you think, okay, we want to head in this direction, and here's that value change, but you realize there's some technology that needs to be developed in order to help enable that properly. Yeah. And systems change as well, big level, big thinking change.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
And it is kind of a catch-22, because you have to think about the paradox of, well, if this market economy changes and corrupts our values so that we have a value system which is not in accord with using our technology productively, then if we produce more technology, have more power over the natural world, then we're not going to use it for the right things. We're just going to use it for what we have been using it for, war and so on, and exploitation. So it's actually, you have to think about which one do you want to change first. Do you want to increase technology to change our values, or do we change our values to change technology?
And do we have to think about what happens first, or do we just have a unification of minds where some people keep working on technology and others are working on a global shift in consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think is important to consider is where all the technology advancements come from. We fund a lot of our technology with military spending, which means they're looking for military applications for technology and not just doing curiosity-based research and finding out more about the universe and seeing how that could be applied for the betterment of human civilization.
Yeah. I guess a great example of that is E equals MC squared. So that can tell you, you can work out the age of the sun, and you can work out nuclear power and go on to all sorts of different things. We could be, we're sending things off into space using nuclear power, but instead the first thing that was developed was a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, and that just says the whole problem with the kind of system that we're in and the way we're thinking right now, in this like very divisive kind of way where we're trying to acquire resources for ourselves. It seems to be like, I think that a lot of people right now have developed a value system where it's about what can I get for me, as opposed to what can I get for everyone, and without the recognition that what I get for everyone is getting something for me, because we aren't a closed system. Humans aren't a closed system. We actually do rely on each other and do rely on natural resources, and we need to be in harmony with the planet in order for us to thrive, especially collectively and especially over a long period.
If we destroy our own planet, it won't matter how much money you've accumulated or how much fame you've gained. It won't matter. So there is a point where personal gain becomes common gain. So what is good for everyone is good for you, but we've focused too much on what is just at personal gain.
I think another point to bring up, this is a little bit different, but I think it's still to do with this unity theme, is Marshall Rosenberg talked about this, the guy who started nonviolent communication, that a lot of people in this world are more intent on trying to trying to be right, as in, even if their idea is flawed, it doesn't matter if they're in an argument with somebody, they want to be seen as right, that their answer is right, and they want to feel justified in that. And the reality is if we really want to achieve unity and we want to resolve conflicts, even small conflicts or very large scale conflicts, it's not about being right, it's about being correct, as in it's about what is true in nature, discovering the true nature of the universe, and all of us striving to achieve that sense of unity. And achieve that sense of understanding the natural world and understanding what is true. And I think we can find unity in that as well.
And I think that's why the Zeitgeist movement talks about applying the scientific method to social concerns, because the core part of the scientific method is getting closer and closer approximations to reality. So so this amalgamation of creative, open-minded thought in order to help solve these problems, as well as applying skepticism, the scientific method, in order to understand reality, is really what this global unity is about. And that's what we're really hoping to achieve this Z-Day. So, to move on from there, did you guys want to talk about the presenters? Well, I wanted to say, when is Z-Day?
Oh, good question. So it's coming up very soon, 25th and 26th of March at the New Globe Theatre in Fortitude Valley in Brisbane, Australia. We've been fortunate enough to get the main event here. Okay, guys, so now we're just going to talk about the presenters. And Z-Day will be held on March 25th and 26th at the New Globe Theatre in Fortitude Valley. So basically we're going to start off with 10 o'clock registration so everyone can get organised, and then I'll introduce the day at 10:30. Then after that, we have one of our lovely first guests coming in all the way from Germany, and his name is Frankie Muller, and he is the Zeitgeist Germany coordinator. And he will be talking about TZM understandings. So this is really just a rundown of what the Zeitgeist movement is, where we've been, what we're doing now, and where we're going. After that, we're going to have our lovely friend, Cameron Reilly, who runs another meetup here in Brisbane. So Zach, I might get you to share a bit more about Cameron.
Yeah, Cameron and I are good friends. We've had a few chess games together, and I just presented at his events yesterday about the history of paper money and how the financial system works. I really actually enjoy his antics. He's a very funny guy, and he's also a true scientist and historian at heart. I remember I was talking with him last night about the Reserve Bank of Australia being a privately owned corporation and not being part of the government, and he was questioning me at everything I was saying, and I was just so happy about that, because even though, you know, it's a little bit frustrating when someone does that, it shows a good skepticism, a good skeptical mind, and that's what science is all about. It's about questioning literally everything. Every fact or proposal that anyone gives you, you do have to question. Arguments from authority are worth nothing. You know, everything has to be supported with evidence.
I really like the way, and I would just say this is something more about you, Zach, is as a Zeitgeist Movement coordinator, I think you do a really good job at really making people feel comfortable in the movement in that way. And I think that this is kind of a reflection of how successful our chapter has been, in that when people come to join us, even if they don't understand the economic system, even if they're skeptical about the way we think, we see that as something positive, something that we can work with, and we can see that they want to understand reality. So it's not about getting frustrated at anyone who shows up and doesn't understand our concepts.
We have a couple of friends, and they're American friends, and we talk to them about the banking system and how the economic system we have currently is ultimately flawed and self-destructive, and they argue with us and they disagree, and they think that we don't like that, but in fact that's fantastic, because we get to discuss it more and understand more points of view with them. I think it's a really great thing to argue in the true sense of the word.
I think it really helps us grow as people and really understand the nature of reality, which is what we were talking about before. And, you know, the most interesting part of that is that they support us. They support the Zeitgeist movement and the work that we do. They help us organize things and administrative tasks. So even if they don't agree with all of the fundamental parts of it, it's still to do with this unity, this unifying part of it, that we all see the value in what we're doing, and they know that what we're doing is ultimately something that's going to improve the world.
Yeah, you don't need to agree on everything with the Zeitgeist movement ethos. All you need to agree on is that you want to create a better world for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, moving back to Cameron's presentation, he's giving a presentation about the psychopath economy, because I believe he just wrote a 500-page book on how, how psychopaths can game their way through the current economic system and end up with having a disproportionate amount of power, because they are willing to do things that non-psychopaths aren't willing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that we premise this event with talking about these kind of things, that what the problems with the system actually are, that they are systemic problems, that it doesn't actually matter what restrictions we put in place. It's always going to end up this way, because it incentivizes this kind of behavior in this particular system that we live in. Anyway, do we want to move on to our next presenter?
Sure.
So we'll have a lunch break. So I'm just going to talk about that very quickly as well. This is the first Z-Day Global, I think, that has provided free food as well. And we're making sure that it's all vegan food as well, because I know that a lot of people in the Zeitgeist movement have also taken on the vegan lifestyle. So we also thought we would make sure that it was open for all types, because I guess non-vegans can also eat vegan food.
So I'm the house vegan chef.
Yes.
My official training is a nutritionist, and I could say unequivocally that you can live on a vegan diet completely healthily. There's nothing nutritionally missing from a vegan diet. And veganism just seems to be in accord with the Zeitgeist movement ethos of science and so on, where you're trying to minimize harm to everyone, and it just seems completely unnecessary to do factory farming and kill animals in mass slaughterhouses if we don't nutritionally require it. And the environmental damage of animal product consumption is immense.
And we also are fortunate enough to have so we'll have two spaces, one in the main stage, which has our main presentations where Frankie, Cameron, and more of the other speakers that we'll be discussing today will be speaking. But there's also a workshop space at the Z-Day, because we find that one of the most important parts of Z-Day isn't just listening to the presentations, it's also collaborating projects. People want to be heard, people want to learn, people want to ask questions openly. And so we've given another space called the workshop space. And this is where other workshop presenters will be discussing different kinds of concepts. And one of them will be a veganism workshop as well. So if you are interested in that one will be on Sunday afternoon, just before the closing. So you're more than welcome to come along to that if you have your ticket.
And we'll be providing a very wide variety of vegan food. So if you are interested in what vegans actually eat, because there's this misconception that you just eat grass or something.
Salad.
That we'll have sushi and curries and nibbles and hummus dips and...
Nibbles. Hors d'oeuvres.
Yes. But there'll be more than enough to eat. The only thing I'm worried about is we're expecting over 200 people, and that's quite a catering task for 2 days back to back.
So if you are one of the people that are coming along and you're looking for something to do, please put up your hand to help Zach at the venue if you can, because we're going to be running around like headless chooks.
Well, I made this sign for one of the other events that I ran, and I had a picture of Richard Nixon with a line through it, and a red line through it, and it says, "This kitchen works just like the Zeitgeist movement's vision of an RBE. Everything is free, but don't be a dick."
That's great. Yeah, well, I think that's pretty much the most simple way to explain an RBE, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. Our next presenter, which will be after lunch, will be Rich Penny, and he's speaking at 1 p.m. We did vaguely touch on what he will be talking about. Did you want to expand on that one too, Zach?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that guy's work. He's from Toronto, Canada, and he gave a presentation in the 2015 Z-Day on the moral agency in free market economics, basically, where he talks about how the market incentives actually corrupt people's decision making and even perception of reality. And he's also a science fiction writer, and I think he has 4 books now in his saga.
The Symbiosis Saga, or is that one of the books?
I think that's book 1.
Oh, okay.
I can check.
Sorry, Rich, if you're listening to this. But we will put some links in the show notes as well, so that you can have a look at the presenter's work. They'll also be available as presentation notes at Z-Day, so you can look up more information on each of our presenters. So after Rich, we will have Luke Williams and Kim Benzie, who are the lovely guys from Dead Letter Circus. And Dead Letter Circus is an acclaimed Aussie band, and these guys support the Zeitgeist movement. You can almost tell that if you listen to their lyrics anyway. And yeah, we were fortunate enough to meet these guys after one of their gigs one night, and they're very happy to do a presentation for us. Zach, did you want to talk about these guys? Dead Letter Circus? I thought it would be cool if we could like read a couple of their lyrics out or something like that. Okay, so let's do that.
Choose your ground, lead, or start running. I love that quote from that This Is the Warning song, because it's basically talking about what responses people can have in our current world. It's like, choose your ground, which side of history are you going to be on? lead, become a leader like I think Casey has become for the Zeitgeist movement in Australia, or start running and just like get out of here.
Oh man, sometimes I want to start running. I know that feeling anyway. It can be quite a disconcerting world that we live in, especially with all the problems going on right now. Sometimes, you know, that fight or flight response really just can take over quite a lot.
And another quote from a Dead Lettuce Circus song, from the most recent album, from the song Show Me, is "An army for peace, for revolution. We're almost there, they're almost dead."
Oh, who are they?
Yeah.
Maybe we leave that for the audience to say in the comments.
They're just talking about the current system, the rulers of the current system. They talk a lot about, you know, we'll tear the king from the throne and all that stuff.
Reminds me of what Eleanor Goldfield said, who's one of our other presenters who we'll talk about soon, but she said either we overcome capitalism. Sorry, I'm totally paraphrasing this terribly, but either we... I think she might have said kill, but I'm not sure. Capitalism, or we die with it.
I do really think that capitalism is very much like cancer, where you either die from the cancer or you kill the cancer, but both of you can't survive.
I think I prefer Buckminster Fuller's idea of it's like we're growing up as an embryo inside an egg, you know, like a chicken egg. And so we've been given plenty of fossil fuels or, you know, protein, and we're expanding really quickly. But you get to the point that you actually need to peck your way out of the shell. Otherwise, you're going to end up dead. So if we don't transition away from capitalism, we'll just be like this horrible dead fetus inside an egg. Yeah.
I mean,
go on.
You've talked a lot, Michael, about peak oil, and it's most likely that we have passed peak oil, which means we're going to have quite a bit of trouble pumping more oil as the years drag on. And even though the US does subsidize oil production, and they've actually increased their production and exports of oil, this can't be sustained for a long period of time, and we can't tolerate being reliant on fossil fuels for much longer because of the social and environmental damages that it creates.
So we actually hit peak oil in 2006, but it's peak conventional oil. What's been taken up is fracking especially, and some of the deep sea drilling and those sorts of things. And so those unconventional oils are what's likely to hit us over the tipping point for climate change. So they worked it out. If we weren't doing unconventional oils, we probably would be within the CO2 budget. But it's what the age we're in now, it's all of that stuff that's going to take us over. So we need to get to renewables as fast as possible.
Yeah, and with peak oil, you get the easiest, the most accessible oil first and go down that kind of gradient. So we've kind of picked all the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, because all that oil is now no longer available, and the only oil left is the oil that is deep in the ground, or you have to use fracking to get, or so on. And
lower return on energy investment. So, yeah, it's not as worth getting.
Not to go on a huge big tangent, but talking about market economics and profit and capitalism and so on, you would think that trying to mine a resource where you have to spend more money than you actually get wouldn't be done in a capitalist society. But this system isn't just capitalism. It also has the winners of capitalism trying to preserve the system itself. So they are actually mining oil, at least in America, in an unprofitable way, just by the banks loaning oil companies huge amounts of money to make sure that they never become insolvent and stop producing oil. So it has more to do with preserving the game at this point than actually what the game was for. And I think this is kind of like one of the warning signs that capitalism is dying. Because you could say that capitalism has, or at least had, merits in the past, where dynamic equilibrium with supply and demand and rather than a dictator saying what prices were. The market would determine prices, and that did work better than the previous system for a time, but I think that time is past. So we've had many social systems throughout human history, and capitalism has been the best one so far, and I think it is starting to decline now in its effectiveness, and we need to find a new social structure to organize and allocate resources.
So one thing you talked about there is the fossil fuel industry, and I feel like one of the big things is going back to that mindset change. And in Unities is going, look, there's probably 50 people in the world that if they realized that they weren't part of a fossil fuel company, but actually they were an energy company, that's the only mindset change needed to go, oh, hey, let's go to renewables.
Unfortunately, to maintain control over the world, and the world is controlled through, in my personal opinion, fiat currency, fractional reserve banking and everything, you need to make that currency used to buy energy. And if energy can be produced locally and it's green energy, then it can't be controlled and you can't maintain the value of your currency. So even our currency system, our monetary system, is archaic. It doesn't take into account the need for renewable energies and the damage to the environment that fossil fuels do.
The petrodollar.
Yes, the petrodollar.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying before, Zach, really leads well into our next presenters, because, and you too, Michael, talking about how we need to find our way out of that eggshell right now, that otherwise we're going to die inside it, which would be really sad for us. So this analogy was actually talked about in the Future Thinkers podcast as well, in episode 36, called Global Phase Shift with Daniel Schmachtenberger. This guy was really interesting, and I wish I knew about him sooner, because I would have loved to invite him along to ZDAY as well. He understands the system we live in so well, and he spoke about that very eloquently. So if you would like to listen to another podcast, I highly recommend the Future Thinkers podcast. We also have the presenters of the Future Thinkers podcast coming along to ZDAY. These guys, Mike and Uvi, will be presenting on their own. And Uvi will be speaking about building resilience. So living in this particular world, we were just talking about people having that fight or flight response in this world. And I think that in order to actually make the change we want to see, we do need to be resilient, and we do need to recognize what's important and try not to be ignorant of these problems, and actually work on our own personal development in order to do this as well. And this is something that we consistently need to work on and encourage each other to do, and look after each other in that process.
This is one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about the future, because one of the principal adaptations that humans have over other species,
Homo sapiens in particular,
is that we can change with changing environments, and we can cope with highly stressful environments, and we can think laterally and outside the box. So I recognize that we are in a very dire situation right now, but I do think humans have the ability to adapt to new environments, and that's why I am optimistic that we do have the capacity to change our social system. It's only a mindset change, and humans definitely have that capacity.
It's even crazy when you think about what we've created now. You know, I think about the society we have, which isn't all bad. You know, obviously we speak about the problems with it, but there's just some incredible things that we've created. And some of those things have just been things that we first imagined, you know. They didn't come from any physical... money, for example, this idea of money doesn't now it doesn't represent any physical resource. The value on money is what you think the value is. It's just a perceived collective perception. That's all it is. And before that, it was just an idea. Before we had this concept of money, it was just an idea in our heads that we made a reality. And even though we can see its destructive force now, like you said, it's reaching the end of its life cycle, we can imagine something new.
One of the people I follow who talks a lot about the monetary system, Mike Maloney, he said, concerning the monetary system, that we're all dreaming the same dream, and all it requires is a few people to wake up and the dream kind of collapses and the illusion collapses.
And maybe we can, through what we imagine, we can create a new reality.
Yeah, we can. I mean, as you said, we dreamed money up. We can dream a new social system up. I mean, that's one of the things that we do, is we imagine things and then we make them real.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So the other speaker from the Future Thinkers podcast is Mike Gilliland, and he's going to be talking about the power of the blockchain. I don't know if either of you know much about that, if you'd like to talk at that.
I know a fair bit. I don't know what he'll be talking about exactly, but...
You can share what you know about the blockchain with us, Michael.
So the blockchain is actually a way of getting around, it's the Byzantine generals problem.
Right.
So the idea is, if you imagine, go back to the Byzantine Empire era, and you've got two different generals who are going to go and attack a city. And they need to attack at the same time, but they're on different parts, they're away from the city. And they send a messenger over to say, hey, go and attack at this time. And they need to make sure that that message wasn't intercepted. And so they, wait for a message back saying, yes, I've received you. Yep, we'll attack at this time. And you go, well, how do they know that I received it? So there ends up being this whole big communication issue.
Yeah.
It's fairly complicated, and so there's a technological way where a whole bunch of computers are doing some mathematical work that requires a fair bit of computing power to do, but in doing so, it ensures that actually all of these messages that are being sent out are verified by lots of different computers.
So not by a centralized body?
No. So it's a peer-to-peer, decentralized way, and it's that computing power that ensures, okay, yep, we know that that's what's happened. On top of that messaging system, they've gone, well, the messages are going to be, you've got this amount of money, or here's this transaction. So that the actual blockchain technology itself can be used for a whole variety of different things. At the moment, it's being used as a money transfer system. So. Yeah.
And what is the advantage over this to the way that we currently make transactions?
Our current trust system is that we trust PayPal or the banks to make sure that they're the ones that go and verify people's identity. And when
we
you
know
get
they can't be trusted.
Well, the idea is that you verify your identity with the bank, and then they verify other people's, and then somehow they deal with it all, but we don't have to deal with.
I don't think it's that they can't be trusted. It's that they have an incentive for corruption if they have a central authority. When you have power in a small number of hands, the incentive to corrupt becomes higher. So when you have a decentralized monetary system, where everyone can verify everyone else's transactions and you don't need to go through a central authority, it's far harder to control. And I think because we have such a centralized monetary system now, that would be at least a move in the right direction, even if later on we move away from money entirely.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. So if you want to learn more about blockchain, then come along for Mike's presentation at 2:30. And then after that, we have another break at 3 o'clock, and then we'll be back at 3:30 for Federico Pistono, who is one of our more high-profile guests, who was the ex-Italian Zeitgeist movement coordinator, who travels around the world doing several presentations. He's written a book called Robots Will Steal Your Job, But That's Okay, How to Survive the Economic Collapse and Be Happy. And he's quite a charismatic, fun character. He does a lot of YouTube videos that are very informative as well as very entertaining. Did anyone else want to share something about Federico?
I really like his video about stupid people, because that was one of the most entertaining and informative videos I've seen in a long time, where he talks about whenever you make a decision, ask yourself two questions. Is this good for me, and is this good for everyone else? And his definition of an intelligent decision is something that is both good for you and good for yourself. And the definition of a stupid decision is something that is bad for you and bad for everyone else. And then there's two other options. If it's good for you and bad for everyone else, it's a bandit decision. And if it's good for everyone else but not for you, then it's a helpless decision.
Yeah, and I think you don't make one decision and then put yourself in that box, but it's kind of like, I guess you test yourself over time.
Well,
or test your friends.
Every decision you make is a point on this, in one of those 4 quadrants, and then if you get a big clustering in one quadrant, then you could say you're either a intelligent person or a bandit type person.
And what's his advice for when you discover someone's a stupid person?
Avoid them at all costs.
Run away from them is how he puts it.
Even a bandit is preferable to a stupid person, because a stupid person's decisions don't make any sense because they're bad for themselves and bad for everyone else. So you can't actually determine by what means they're making that decision. But at least with a bandit, you can decide, well, I know they're going to try and maximize for themselves, so I can at least kind of understand what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So that's one of his videos, but I don't think he's going to be talking about that too much. The title of his presentation is Ethics of Technology and Exponential Empathy, which sounds very interesting. And I'm not quite sure what he means by exponential empathy, but I'm very curious to see. Does anyone want to take a stab as to what they think he means by this?
I think we'll just wait till Z-Day and see it.
All right.
I suspect it might be something along the lines of what Jeremy Rifkin talks about with expanding empathy. So you go back quite a long time, and our empathy was within the family. You just connected to people within that. Then we expanded and had empathy to those within our tribe. And then we got larger communities, and it was those within our institutions, usually religious. And then it's now currently at the national level. It's those within the country. And so the idea is to expand that to all of those on the planet. And when we start colonizing other planets, then all of those within the universe. Yeah. And
I think it's also related to veganism, expanding that sphere of empathy where, as you were saying, like...
To other earthlings.
To other earthlings, but... You notice how people kind of stop at certain points where they're willing to empathize with other mammals and say birds, but not fish. And for myself, for instance, I don't necessarily feel bad if I harm an insect. I probably shouldn't reveal that much personal information. But, I can see the harm and damage of hurting marine life and bird life and mammal life. But if I see a cockroach on the ground, I swat it, and I don't think for a second about how bad that could be about extinguishing a life.
You've just lost your level 7 vegan powers.
Yeah,
you attack things with a shadow. Yeah.
That's why my t-shirt says level 5 vegan.
Yeah, but I think that's a very good conversation for another day. But we might move on because we've still got a few people to discuss about Z-Day.
I did want to mention ethics in technology.
Sure.
And there's usually the core pure science. So understanding E equals MC squared, or nanotechnology, or those sorts of things. And then the application of that, and it's usually in the application of that pure science that's where a lot of ethics comes in. So that's where we go: is it a nuclear weapon, or is it, nuclear power for deep space probes? So yeah, I feel like that's where there's some interesting ethics things that we will have to be worried about within the future.
I think we might even have to be concerned a bit more about the implications of artificial intelligence, which once seemed like it could be a pipe dream and now seems like a reality that could hit us at any moment. And what's his name? Nick Bostrom, the guy who wrote Superintelligence, actually spoke about what are we going to do when this happens, and not just the threats of AI, but also ethical implications for a being that could be considered sentient.
Yeah, I've read Superintelligence, and I'll try quickly mentioning some bits. So there's 3 main issues. One is three types of AI. You've got the genie, first of it, is the oracle. So you can ask any question, Siri style. Hey,
Right.
I want to understand something, and it just provides information.
Like the one out of Her?
Yes, but it can't actually manipulate the world.
Right.
So the oracle, you've then got the genie, and the genie is something that can actually go and create things. It can manipulate the world, and
Your wish is my command.
and so it's more of an evil genie.
Oh.
So if you say, "Oh, I want just
it's
lots and
like-
lots of staples,"
Yeah.
and so it works out how to convert all of the matter and energy in its vicinity into staples. Humans, the
It's
planets,
just super competent
it sends
at what
out
you ask it to do.
and suddenly, the universe starts getting converted into staples. You
Yeah.
go, oops, wrong wish.
Yeah.
And what was the third type?
So the third type is the sovereign AI. That's one which would actually intentionally sort of control sort of humans in the way that we'd think of like a large government or something like that.
And we would just be kind of like the chimpanzees in zoos that they look at and go, oh, look at that. They're so cute. We came from them. It's kind of like, the way that we would look at chimpanzees, for example, and we just say, oh, they're our distant ancestors and we can see the likeness in them to us, but, they can't compute, at 1/10,000th of the power that we can. They're kind of just like a fun little anecdote of our past.
And that kind of brings me back to some of the work that Federico has done with technology. He's talked about the exponential nature of technology and the linear nature of human society, and how that will eventually create a collision course where he talks about the dangers of automation, and then he presents the solution of a universal basic income as at least a temporary solution to provide human well-being in the transition towards the singularity.
So really interesting stuff, guys. Don't miss Federico's presentation if you
He's
can.
got so many accolades that you can't even talk about everything he's done.
Like, where do we start with this guy? Yeah. Cool. So after Federico, we'll be winding down towards the end of our day, and we're going to finish off with Gilbert Ismail, who is the TZM Global Chapters Administrator. And I think we might be lucky enough to be getting a snapshot of what the new zeitgeistmovement.com website is going to look like. At the moment, our old one is quite dated, and the team in LA, the non-profit organisation, have been working tirelessly to try and get the new website online, and this is going to have additional functionality that is way beyond what it was before, and hopefully that will give us more opportunity to connect with chapters around the world and also engage in activism that's more, well, I should say less administrative, and we're actually able to concentrate on learning more and actually connecting people and not just having to, pay for updating websites and things like that.
There's this moral hazard with the Zeitgeist movement because we advocate a society without money, that we try and constrain ourselves and not use money as much as possible. But sometimes for those kind of projects, like creating a new website, you do need a bit of money to pay people to make it actually happen. And
Well, unfortunately, we're still slaves to the system too.
exactly, like money isn't perpetually scarce because of the debt outstrips the money supply, so everyone has to compete for money, and we're always racing against trying to get enough money so we can actually put it towards these projects that really matter, like creating a good website or putting on a nice Z-Day for everyone.
It is really hard because I find the more money that gets involved, the harder it is to work. No, how would I say this? It does feel like it corrupts a little bit every time money's involved, which is a very interesting observation, in that every time money is involved, then there's always more tension in the air and your values automatically shift. And so I think it's really important for us to absolutely try to do things without money, and absolutely try to think of other ways to, I would call it, hack the system.
Yeah. We should probably bring up Paul, who's given us access to his facility, and thank him on air, because he's really kind to
Yeah.
let us use this for free.
And this is one of the great examples of the ways that we're doing what we can to get around these kind of things is, have awesome people like Paul who are willing to donate his time and energy and towards giving us this studio today to record this podcast. Yeah.
That said, we're trying to transition to a world without the need for money, but we do still have the need for money. So don't feel bad if you have to use money. That's just the world we're in. But the fact that you're working towards one without money is humane.
I think that it's just started to rain really heavily here. So you guys might hear that a little bit in the background, but hopefully it's not too disconcerting and you can still listen to the podcast anyway.
I thought that was just feedback.
No, that's why I took my headphone off for a little bit and I said, no, that's rain. Yeah, it's the rainy season here in Brisbane. We're hoping that we get a few clear days leading up to the event so that we can go and have an Aussie barbecue up at Kangaroo Point in Brisbane, which overlooks our beautiful Brisbane River, and just get a bit of an Aussie experience for a lot of our international guests. But we're playing it by ear at the moment because unfortunately it's been raining quite a lot.
Yes, I will be providing Vegemite sandwiches for our international guests on Zeitgeist Day, just so they get a little exposure to the stereotypical Australian diet.
It's not stereotypical. There's a nice Amanda Palmer song just saying, keep away from Vegemite.
Oh, nonsense. Vegemite is delicious. I used to have it all the time when I was a kid.
You can see the conflict.
Okay, just before we go on, I'm just going to share, we won't get deeply into what's happening in the workshop space, but I'll just very quickly touch on that. So we've got one of our other lovely coordinators, Caroline, who's going to be talking about solar punk. And solar punk is basically a writing genre, and you might have heard of steampunk, which is another genre. So solar punk is kind of similar, except it's based in a future beyond scarcity and hierarchy where humanity, nature and technology are integrated. So this is Caroline's interest.
I just want to bring one thing up about the Zeitgeist movement, which I think is a terminology problem, which is this isn't post-scarcity or, there will still be scarcity. This is post-intentional scarcity because the current economic system, you have an incentive to create scarcity on purpose for the means of profiteering. But if we were to allocate resources efficiently, we wouldn't intentionally create scarcity. But there will always be some scarcity of resources, of time, of attention, and so on.
Yeah, so like an example, like you said, time. If someone wants somebody's time, some people might have a particular skill set. You can't have all skill sets accessible to you at all times. So
there's only 24 hours in a day. You only live for 100 years.
I mean, actually, I would argue that maybe with more virtual reality becoming more like reality, we might actually be able to overcome that a little bit, but I guess that's a conversation for another day.
But even if we can harness the universe's energy, there's still a finite amount of energy. There's a finite amount of steel and gold and aluminium and nickel on the earth. Even if we extract it all and recycle it and so on, there's still a finite amount. So it is not completely abundant. It is just going to be far more abundant than it is now.
For sure.
At least the necessities of life would be provided. Food, water, electricity, transport, education, entertainment, like all those necessities of life would be available for free to everyone on the planet. And yes, there may be times that you can't get a giant yacht. You have to go with something, a little boat or something. That's.
But it's the utility of the good that actually matters, not owning the good. So you don't want to own a camera. You need what that camera provides. And you don't want to own a yacht. You want to go on the yacht for the time you want to be on a yacht. And then
owning a yacht is a pain in the butt.
Yeah. You don't want a drill, you want a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it. I think more the type of scarcity we're talking about is going to a concert with limited seating, or the kind of scarcity we're talking about with Z-Day, which is limited seating. I mean, obviously, we'd love to open up to as many people as possible, but we have limited seating in that theatre, and it doesn't matter if you're really famous and you have a huge venue with a stadium or something like that. There's still limited seating, so those kind of things are just scarce.
And so how we would allocate resources is, rather than using a political or economic dogma, it would be by its merits. So by using the scientific method, we would decide what is the most efficient allocation of resources, rather than just following some archaic economic or religious or political dogma.
Based on whether someone is more valuable than someone else. And that's normally to do with economic bigotry, but often other types of bigotry too.
We can mention this a little bit later when we talk about the 3 rules for rulers.
All right. Okay, so going on from there, we also have Oliver Koslick, who is coming in from Canada as well, and he's going to be talking. He's going to be doing a short course on emotional suppression, on how to recognize and deal with gaslighting and ambient abuse. We might not talk at all of these because we have gone quite a lot over time, so we'll just go through these quite quickly.
I remember talking to him on the TeamSpeak meeting just about structural violence and how there is violence inbuilt into the system to kind of very small things that are irritating but not big enough that you actually notice them.
Yeah, so that'll be really interesting. So, by the way, these workshops are an hour long as opposed to the 20-minute presentation. So you can actually sit down and really get into the discussion with the presenters in the workshop space. And these will be going on in unison with the presentation. So you'll need to just choose which one you want to watch. We
you
also
have a finite amount of time and energy and attention, and you have to choose where to allocate it.
Yep. And then we also have Brad Cheney, who is the Zeitgeist Melbourne coordinator, and he'll be coming in and talking about zero waste and minimalisation. So basically that is trying not to use plastic and I guess and other methods you can use in order to limit your waste.
Reducing your environmental impact on the world.
Then after that, after the break, we have Mark Enoch, who is coming in from, well, he lives in 2 locations. He lives in Maine and also Catalonia, which is in Spain, I think. And he is a very passionate RBE activist, and he'll actually be doing, he's called it guerrilla marketing of the RBE message. So he'd actually like to, I guess, engage people into actually handing out brochures and so forth, and actually getting the message out there to as many people as possible. He's not so interested in the low-hanging fruit like most of us are, and just kind of engaging people who are already thinking this way, but he actually wants to get it out to the mainstream, you know. And so that's what he'll be talking about. After that, we'll have some friends from Brisbane. Well, actually, they're from the States, but they live in Brisbane here with us, Matt and Vera, and they are from the Crypto Party. And they are going to be here to talk to us about how we can make our devices more secure. And if you are concerned about that, you can bring your device along on the day, and they can actually help you make your device more secure, whether it's your laptop or your phone or your tablet.
I just want to talk about people who may be listening to this and thinking about how they fit into this whole movement. And an important point to bring up is that everyone has their own thing that they're good at. And where you are best utilized is what you enjoy and what you feel, you know, is your calling, so to speak. Wow, that rain is really loud.
It's so loud. I'm just wondering if we should continue in 5 minutes, or whether
yeah, maybe we can cut and wait for the rain to stop.
All right, guys, we might just cut for a second and see if the rain is really that bad over the recording, and come back in 5 minutes.
Jeez.
See you soon.